What's going on, everyone? So in this video, it's going to be the basic on how to find supply and demand zones. I'll go over briefly how I have my trading view settings set up for the rectangle and for the different zones as well. So let's get into it. I am using the replay system. We'll let it play out and I'll show you exactly what we look for a demand zone. So right here, what I see is I see a few different things. I see a few higher lows, so the market is moving higher, and I see some higher highs. So I know just from that the market is moving a bit more bullish than we're moving bearish. That is the trend. Right now the trend is our friend. We're moving more bullish. So what I see is I see a demand zone right here. And I'll tell you why. Because we have a red basing candle, and that's what we're going to look for a demand zone. So think of a demand is going to be a green zone, but we want that last candle, the basing candle, to be red, because this is where the sellers are trapped, right? People were shorting the market during this wick, during this candle. They are now trapped because of the impulse move that was followed afterwards. This impulse move is very important. If we don't see a strong move after we have our basing or our demand zone candle, then we're not going to have that much strength in that zone. The impulse move really gives us that help and that strength and that confirmation, because what it's doing is it's leaving a lot of liquidity and unfilled orders in this area. So I'm going to mark out our rectangle from the open of the candle, the open, not the high, from the open to the low. And that is how we make our demand zone. And for the rectangle tool, I'll have it on green for demand. And for this, I'll have it up to 30. And what you do is you go into the settings and you have it to extend right. That way you don't need to keep extending it every time. You're able to just place it from the top to the bottom and then you're set. So we'll let it play through and I'll show you guys how we reacted in this demand zone. So price comes into demand. What happens? It stalled out a few times. It gave us a few areas to enter. I'm not going to cover entries on this video. I'm just going over the zones themselves. Now we could have even had a zone right here. However, look at the impulse move afterwards. It seemed pretty weak considering how the previous candle was. So the candle opened to the low versus the next candle's move is very, very important. This candle had a nice strong impulse move, a strong candle. This candle was very weak. It halfway and then it just came right back, right? So we had some weakness in this candle. It came back. We did have the move higher. We could have been able to mark that out, but it is just not as valid of a move. And again, we also have to take into consideration how long or how quick does this move go, right? So this move was a 100-point move for this demand zone, so that's pretty valid. 100 points is a pretty good move on the NASDAQ, whereas this move, if we had that marked out, was only about 45 points. Now, if you're taking a trade and you hit 45 points on the NASDAQ, that's fantastic. But if you're looking for a supply or a demand zone, you usually want to see some strength or momentum afterwards. And if you don't have that, then a lot of times that zone is going to fail. So now that we have an example of a demand zone, let's get into a supply zone. Now, just like a demand zone, we're going to inverse it, right? So we're going to look for some type of green basing candle followed by a strong sell-off. So we have a green basing is going to be some type of green candle. That's when the open and the close, right? The close is higher than the open, but what we look for is a long upper wick. And what that tells us is there are a lot of trapped buyers. Just like demand, we were looking for trapped sellers. We're looking for trapped buyers, and that's how we find our supply zone. For the horizontal array, what you're going to do settings-wise is you could come over to the settings icon, choose whichever color you're looking for, and you could have text and you could change it to whatever you want. Right now this is the 1 hour, and then you're able to save as and save your template. So all of these, everything with a D, 1 hour is a 1 hour demand zone, to the 8 hour, to the 15 minute, to the 90 minute. The time frames I'm going to go over in a few videos from now, so definitely stay tuned. This is going to be a great advanced section for you guys. So now that we have our demand, now that we have our supply, we're going to mark this as an S1, come over to our rectangle tool and bring that up and also save that as a supply. Now we know how to find our supply and demand zones.